His stepdad despised him and wanted to kick him out, completely unaware that the house was legally his. At 19 years old, Jake had spent the past 3 years living with his mom and stepdad, and lately, things had taken a turn for the worse. He felt trapped and overwhelmed, desperately seeking guidance. When Jake's mom married his stepdad at the age of 16, everything initially seemed stable. The stepdad was charming during family outings, but when it was just the two of them, Jake noticed a different side of him. The stepdad made snide comments about Jake's laziness and lack of contribution around the house. Jake tried to brush it off, attempting to keep his distance, but as time passed, the criticism intensified. Whenever Jake's mom wasn't around, the stepdad would pick apart everything he did. He would complain about Jake's chores, the music he enjoyed, and even the way he dressed. Nothing ever met the stepdad's standards. Jake had tried to discuss his feelings with his mom, but she dismissed his concerns. "He's just trying to teach you responsibility," she would say, "or I'm sure he doesn't mean it that way." Everything escalated about 6 months ago when Jake's mom announced she was pregnant. The stepdad was ecstatic, buzzing with excitement about nursery plans and fatherhood. Jake felt a mix of happiness for his mom and a growing sense of isolation. That was when the fabrications began. The stepdad started spinning tales about Jake's supposed misbehavior, claiming he was staying out late and being disrespectful. None of it was true. Jake tried to defend himself, but it always felt like his word was against the stepdad's. His mom appeared confused, unable to discern who to believe. Then, just last week, the stepdad announced plans to remodel the house for the baby. He talked about tearing down walls and rearranging rooms. Jake didn't think much of it until his mom sat him down 2 days ago for a serious conversation. Jake's mom looked visibly uncomfortable, avoiding his gaze as she spoke. "Honey, you're 19 now and becoming a man. We think it might be time for you to get your own place." Jake was taken aback, stumbling over his words in disbelief. "What? Why? Did I do something wrong?" His mom hurried to reassure him, No, it's not that at all. It's just with the baby coming, we need the space. You're old enough now to be on your own. It'll be good for you to learn some independence." Jake could sense that this wasn't truly her decision, her tone betrayed her uncertainty. In the doorway, Jake's stepdad stood with his arms crossed, a smug grin plastered on his face. It became painfully clear to Jake that his stepdad had orchestrated this entire conversation. He tried to argue, explaining that he wasn't ready to move out. "I'm still in community college and I work part-time at a local grocery store. There's no way I can afford my own place right now." But his mom kept insisting that it would be beneficial for him and that he needed to grow up. The worst moment came when his stepdad interjected. "You've got 2 days to find a place. We need to start the remodeling soon and we can't have you underfoot while we're preparing for the baby." 2 days. How could Jake possibly find somewhere to live in that short time? He had no savings, no knowledge of renting an apartment, and no friends who could take him in. Everyone he knew still lived at home. The entire day passed in a blur. Jake struggled to focus at work, making one mistake after another. His boss noticed his distraction and asked if everything was okay. He mumbled something about family issues, attempting to mask his turmoil. Upon returning home, he overheard his stepdad in the kitchen, insisting to his mom that it was high time Jake moved out and that he was holding them back. Jake could hear the uncertainty in his mom's voice, but his stepdad kept speaking over her. "You've got to cut the cord sometime, and he'll thank us for this later." Jake wanted to storm in and confront them both, but he knew it would only backfire. His stepdad had a way of twisting everything, and Jake felt powerless against the manipulation. Now, sitting in his room, Jake struggled to figure out what to do. He had less than 24 hours to devise a plan, and he was completely lost. He couldn't afford an apartment, had no relatives nearby who could take him in, and wasn't even sure how to start looking for a roommate. He considered trying to reason with his mom one last time, but feared it would only worsen the situation. His stepdad would likely accuse him of trying to manipulate her, further isolating him. He even thought about refusing to leave, but the uncertainty of what that would entail left him anxious. Would they be able to legally evict him? Would they call the police? He didn't want to create a scene, but the thought of ending up homeless terrified him. Part of him wanted to grab a bag and leave that very night, but he had no idea where he would go. He could crash on a friend's couch for a couple of nights, but that was hardly a viable long-term solution. Jake felt as though his entire world was crumbling. This was the only home he had ever known, and now he was being pushed out without any warning or support. Anger bubbled inside him toward his stepdad for orchestrating the situation, and he felt hurt that his mom was going along with it. Fear loomed large as he contemplated what would come next. He kept replaying memories in his mind, the comforting smell of his mom's cooking, the familiar creaks of the floorboards, and even the silly arguments with his stepdad. It may not have been perfect, but it was home. And then there was the baby. Jake had been looking forward to becoming a big brother, even if it would be strange at first. Now, he feared he might never know his little sibling. Would his mom and stepdad simply erase him from their lives? He tried to stay calm and think rationally, but it felt nearly impossible. Every time Jake attempted to formulate a plan, panic washed over him, leaving his mind blank. How was he supposed to balance school, work, and finding a new place to live all at once? Even if he did find somewhere, how would he afford it? He had spent hours scrolling through rental listings online, but everything was exorbitantly priced. Even the cheapest studios were far beyond what his part-time salary could cover, and most places required first and last month's rent, along with a security deposit. Where was he supposed to get that kind of money? He considered dropping out of school to work full-time, but that felt like a defeat, like throwing away his future. He had worked hard to maintain his grades and didn't want to sacrifice that progress. Yet, the reality of not having a place to live loomed over him, making it hard to envision continuing his studies. The more he contemplated the situation, the angrier he became. This wasn't fair, he hadn't done anything wrong. Jake didn't consider himself a bad kid. He didn't drink or do drugs. He had never been in trouble with the law, helped out around the house, and earned decent grades. He had a job. So why was he being punished? He replayed conversations with his stepdad in his mind, wondering if he could have acted differently. Perhaps if he had stood up for himself more or made an effort to bond with his stepdad, things might have turned out differently. But deep down, Jake knew that wasn't the case. His stepdad had made up his mind about him long ago, and nothing he could have done would have changed that. He thought about reaching out to his biological dad, but they hadn't spoken in years. His dad had left when Jake was little and had never shown much interest in being part of his life. He doubted his dad would even answer if he called. As for other family, his grandparents had passed away the previous year and he barely knew his aunts and uncles. They lived in different states and the family connection had always been tenuous at best. He couldn't imagine any of them would be willing to take him in. The worst part was the overwhelming sense of loneliness that enveloped him. He couldn't talk to his mom about his feelings because it was clear whose side she was on. His friends tried to offer support, but none of them truly understood the gravity of his situation. They all viewed his impending move as an exciting adventure, oblivious to the fact that he was being forced out without any preparation or support. Jake's friends didn't understand that he was being forced out without any preparation or a place to go. He had thought about posting on social media to see if anyone knew of an affordable room for rent, but embarrassment held him back. He didn't want everyone to know his situation or think he was incapable of taking care of himself. As the hours passed, desperation began to set in. He started searching for roommate ads, but most listings specified they wanted someone older or with a full-time job. He even considered the possibility of sleeping in his car for a while, but he was unsure if that would be safe or even legal. Jake kept hoping his mom would realize how unreasonable this all was and tell his stepdad to back off. Yet every time he saw her, she merely gave him a sad pitying look and asked if he had found a place yet. It felt as if she had already given up on him. He felt lost, standing on the precipice of a daunting future. He wasn't ready for this upheaval. Jake lacked the skills and resources to live independently, and the thought of ending up homeless or having to drop out of school terrified him. He wished he could reach out to someone who had gone through something similar for advice. Time was running out and he felt increasingly trapped with nowhere to turn. He appreciated anyone who had taken the time to read his struggles, writing it all out was cathartic. Days went by and Jake remained in a state of panic. That's when he remembered his grandma's sister, who had always been like a godmother to him. At first, he hadn't considered reaching out to her because she lived quite a distance away. However, desperation pushed him to give her a call. Once he explained his situation, she fell silent for a moment before reassuring him. "Don't you worry about a thing, sweetie. You don't need to go anywhere. I'm coming there tomorrow and we'll sort this all out." Confusion mingled with relief as Jake processed her words. He tried to insist that it wasn't necessary for her to travel so far, but she firmly told him not to mention anything to his mom or stepdad and to act normally until she arrived. The next day, his stepdad grew increasingly impatient. He kept asking Jake if he had found a place yet, making comments about how he needed to be out by that afternoon. Jake kept his head down, muttering that he was still looking. Around 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. Jake's stepdad answered the door and Jake recognized his godmother's voice, which sounded unusually angry. She typically exuded calmness, but today was different. She strode into the living room where Jake and his mom were seated and declared, "We need to talk, all of us, now." Jake's stepdad tried to dismiss her, insisting that this was a family matter, but his godmother interrupted firmly. "I am family," she asserted, "and I have something very important to tell you all." It was then that she revealed the shocking truth. Looking directly at Jake, she stated, "Honey, this house belongs to you. Your grandmother left it to you in her will. You're the legal owner, and no one can make you leave." Jake was stunned, unable to process what he was hearing. His mom appeared equally shocked, while his stepdad's face flushed red with anger. He began sputtering that it couldn't be true, but Jake's godmother pulled out legal documents from her purse to clarify. She explained that Jake's grandmother had changed her will shortly before her passing. She had been aware of Jake's mom's relationship with his stepdad, which had begun before their marriage, and she harbored concerns about his intentions. Worried that he might take advantage of both Jake and his mom, she had left the house to Jake as a protective measure. Tearfully, Jake's mom questioned why she hadn't been informed earlier. His godmother replied that the decision had been made swiftly and privately during Jake's grandmother's final days. She further clarified that her grandmother had asked her to keep this a secret unless absolutely necessary. "And now," she said, her gaze piercing Jake's stepdad, "it's necessary." The tension in the room escalated as Jake's stepdad lost control. He began yelling about how it wasn't fair and that they had deceived him. In a fit of rage, he attempted to snatch the papers from Jake's godmother, but she deftly pulled them away. In that moment, Jake found his voice. He stood up, asserting, "Stop. This is my house, and I won't have you acting like this here." The words felt strange coming from him, but they also ignited a sense of empowerment. For the first time, Jake felt he had a foothold in this chaotic situation. His mom remained in tears, caught between her son and her husband, her expression a mix of confusion and distress. While he felt sympathy for her, Jake couldn't shake the anger that surged through him. She had gone along with his stepdad's plan to evict him, and that betrayal stung. After the initial chaos subsided, they all sat down to discuss the situation. Jake's godmother walked them through the legal details, revealing that Jake had officially been the owner of the house since his 18th birthday. Jake's stepdad continued to argue, but his protests quickly lost steam against the weight of the revelation. In the end, Jake made a decision. He told them he was willing to allow everyone to stay in the house, including his stepdad and the baby when it arrived, but only under specific conditions. First, Jake insisted that his stepdad had to start treating him with respect, no more criticism, and no more lies told to his mom about him. Second, he proposed that they all attend family counseling to work on their relationships. Lastly, he declared that any major decisions regarding the house would need to be discussed with him first. Jake's mom agreed immediately, relief evident in her voice. His stepdad, however, was visibly displeased but realized he had little choice. It was either accept Jake's terms or leave. Now, a few days later, the atmosphere in the house remained tense. Jake's stepdad hardly spoke to him, but at least the open hostility had subsided. Meanwhile, Jake's mom appeared caught in a whirlwind of guilt for what had transpired, yet relieved that their family remained intact. Jake found himself still processing everything that had happened. The reality of suddenly being a homeowner at 19 felt surreal. He recognized he had much to learn about property ownership and responsibilities, but he also felt a newfound sense of security that had been absent for a long time. Though he understood there was a long road ahead before they could resemble anything close to a happy family, he felt comforted knowing he had a place in the house, one that couldn't be taken from him. He reflected on the support and advice he had received during this turbulent time and expressed immense gratitude to his grandmother, wherever she might be. He promised himself he would do his best to care for the house and make her proud. Thank you for watching this video. For more content like this, subscribe. I post stories like this from across the internet.